Hello subscribers and guests of the channel. War is a man's business. At all times, women have sent their sons, husbands and fathers to fight with tears in their eyes, and after seeing them off, they prayed that they would return home alive and unharmed. But when the Second World War began, Soviet women managed to prove that those who go to war cannot have a gender. From the very first days of the invasion of the USSR by the Nazi invaders, thousands of women of different nationalities went to the front to defend their country on an equal basis with men. According to history, during the Second World War from 1941 to 1945, about 800,000 girls and women from all over the USSR fought in the ranks of the Red Army. More than 80,000 of them were officers. The Nazis have never encountered such a large presence of women anywhere as in the regular army of the Soviet Union. Soon, German troops received orders to consider female servicemen as partisans, who were not captured, but shot on the spot. Nevertheless, many of the fair sex managed to escape execution and survive in concentration camps. Once in the hands of the enemy, the women had to go through the horrors of torture and bullying. And these were truly terrible events. In the Red Army, the girls were medical workers, snipers, pilots, scouts, gunners and partisans. Soviet women at the front served as an example of heroism, perseverance, and striving for a great victory. In this video, let's talk about how the Nazi fiends treated soldiers of various military professions who were captured by them. The military medical service of the Red Army was mostly staffed with women. After taking nursing courses, patriots went to the People's Militia or to the front. The humanity of the professions did not protect them from ill treatment by the enemy. If nurses were captured by the Nazis, they faced more terrible atrocities than men. The Germans were not limited to beatings. A captive female medical worker was subjected to atrocities. Recalling the horrors of the war, eyewitnesses told how they found nurses shot in the field. Their wounded, naked bodies testified to the brutal violence on the part of the enemy. Once 2 Red Army soldiers found the body of a young girl who was a nurse on the side of the road. Her eyes were gouged out, impaled, and her breasts were cut off. From the atrocities experienced before her death, the girl's hair was completely gray. Snipers were the invisible avengers of the Red Army. During the Great Patriotic War, they kept their opponents in constant fear. Before being sent to the front, they were trained at the Central Women's Sniper Training School. Female shooters destroyed the enemy's manpower with the same skill as their male colleagues. Fascists called female snipers invisible horror. Probably for this reason, the gender factor did not play a decisive role if the Germans managed to capture a brave woman. The women were instructed in advance what their captivity threatened them with. Therefore, in the arsenal of each sniper, in addition to small arms, there were grenades. Once surrounded, they undermined themselves. A woman who could not do so, a terrible fate awaited her. The hero of the Soviet Union, Tatiana Beremzina, was unlucky. Among other snipers, she covered the retreat of the army. The Germans managed to capture her seriously wounded. After much mockery, they shot her with an anti-tank rifle. Another female sniper, Anna Sokolova, was hanged after excruciating torture. The enemy tried to recruit Soviet female snipers. However, history does not know a single fact of such cooperation. The Red Army women who passed the horror of concentration camps and managed to survive tried not to spread about the horrors of German captivity. The fearless veterans wrote many heroic pages in the history of the Great Patriotic War. Zoya Kosmodemyanskaya went to the front right after graduation. She served in the reconnaissance and sabotage unit of the Western Front. In the autumn of 1941, the girl went to enemy territory with the task of burning important strategic objects in the Moscow region. Zoya did not return from that assignment. A Soviet intelligence officer was captured. The fascist invaders subjected the girl to a brutal interrogation. The witnesses of the interrogation were shocked by the steadfastness of the Red Army. She silently endured every torture, did not beg for mercy, refused to give out any information. The Germans staged a demonstration execution in the village of Petrashevo. The civilian population was herded into the square to the gallows. The 18-year-old saboteur managed to make a fiery speech before her death. The Germans, trying to intimidate the local population, did not remove the body from the gallows for a month. The fighter of the sabotage group Vera Voloshyna died in the same period as Zoya Kosmodymianskaya. A 22-year-old girl was captured near the Golovkov State Farm. Beaten to a pulp and bleeding, she proudly walked to the gallows and sang the anthem of the USSR. Lyubov Shevtsova, a member of the Young Guard underground organization, was held captive from January 8 to February 9, 1943. The Germans tortured the Soviet radio operator especially cruelly because she knew the ciphers, passwords and appearances of underground workers. Having achieved nothing, the fascists shot Luba in a rattling forest near the village of Rovenki, Luhansk region. The scout Zinaida Portnova was captured in December 1943. Right during the interrogation, which took place in the village of Gorny, Vitebsk region, she managed to shoot a Gestapo investigator, grabbing his service weapon from the table. Zina destroyed 2 more Hitlerites while trying to escape, but the girl was caught. She was shot on January 10, 1944, after much mockery and torment. Fascists often staged videos and photographs in concentration camps. Real prisoners of war almost never participated in the filming because of their too emaciated appearance. Soviet women showed fortitude and heroism not only at the front, but also in captivity. And this poisoned the lives of warders and camp commandants. All newly arrived women underwent a mandatory examination by a gynecologist for venereal diseases. Camp doctors were surprised to discover that almost all unmarried Soviet girls were virgins. These data were radically different from the statistics of Western Europe. Medical reports showed that the military actions did not affect the high moral qualities of Soviet women. Being in the company of male comrades in arms, the Red Army women observed morality. In concentration camps, female prisoners of war demonstrated incredible resilience. The prisoners were kept in unsanitary conditions, they worked hard and were constantly subjected to sexual violence. The Germans hated the captured Red Army women for their pride and disobedience. Of the 14,000 German concentration camps, Ravensbrück was the largest and most brutal women's camp. Here the Nazis not only used the slave labor of prisoners and destroyed people, but also carried out medical experiments on women. There were women of different nationalities in Ravensbrück: Jews, Gypsies, Germans, and other women who, for one reason or another, were objectionable to the Nazis. Medical experiments were carried out on them. Many of these unfortunate people were subjected to forced sterilization. There was a school of female guards who studied brutality on living people. Here was hell on earth. It was in Ravensbrück in 1943 that Soviet women staged a riot. They did not go to work and went on a hunger strike. They demanded compliance with the rules of the Geneva Convention, for which they received punishment: a long march on the parade ground. The rebellious captives marched with the Soviet patriotic song Holy War. And only at the very end of the war, in the autumn of 1944, a special order was issued for the security service of Nazi Germany that female military prisoners from the Red Army should be kept on the same conditions as men, except for Jews, political officers and commissars, who are subject to execution. But it was too late. Many women have already perished in the ruthless Nazi concentration camps. The Ravensbrück Museum has preserved homemade wooden combs made by prisoners. Even after entering the last circle of hell, women continued to be women. Today there are no statistics on exactly how many Soviet women who experienced inhuman torments died in captivity, were raped, shot, hanged and beaten to death. And now, almost 80 years after the Great Victory, these figures, unfortunately, remain unknown. This is where my video ends. If you are interested, subscribe to my channel.